Right, hello. Here we are today at the lodge to discuss one of the more bizarre items in the history cupboard, which is the Thursley nuclear plan of 1981. I'm Sally Sheffers. I live at Punchbowl Farm.
I'm Marion O'Brien and I live in the lodge with...
And I'm Michael O'Brien, who lives in the lodge also with Marion.
And I'm Tim Wakely and I live in Little Green, just up the street.
So we'll give you a little bit of background to why there was a nuclear plan. And it wasn't just a Thursley thing, was it?
No, it was practically nationwide, I think.
Though how many people took it quite as seriously as Michael Williams, I don't know.
Right, so, and this was all to do with mainly the invasion, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1980. And the government were obviously worried, and so then trickled it down to the parish councils, didn't they?
Yes.
And the Women's Voluntary Service.
Yes, they were sort of involved.
And Michael, you went to a talk
Given by Lady Ball, who was of the WRVS, in
Hale School.
Yes,
That's right.
just outside Farnham. And she really discussed with us all the problems of field catering. One of the more amusing aspects of that was that she was very keen on the Sawyer stove, which had been developed at the time of the Crimean War in the 1850s. And anyway, that was to be our principal form of cooking. The other problem was that they were all stored in Northumberland. So there was going to be really an appalling rush up the A1 to go and collect the items of equipment from the main store. But however, that was a situation that never manifested itself, so we were saved.
And did she give you the recipes for mince for 100 and so on, or was that somebody else?
Good, I really can't remember who gave it. Did Michael Williams? No,
It might have been, or Corin maybe had mince for
Forrest,
100.
yes.
So the author of the Thursley nuclear plan was Michael Williams, but
Yes.
who was Michael Williams?
Michael and Corin Williams, and they were here when you arrived.
Yes, I
certainly
think
when
they
we
came
arrived.
in 63.
And they lived at Cosford, and I always rather referred to them as the self-appointed lords of the manor. Cosford was a very nice estate, and Michael and Corin were movers and shakers. I mean, they had a finger in most pies and were involved in most activities within the village. They then moved, and by the time of this document, they'd moved down Market to Lower House, and then ultimately left the village. But I mean, it's a remarkable document. I mean, it runs to about 70 pages, and for someone who was dyslexic, it must have been quite a challenge to put so much down in writing. But as you say, I think the catalyst has been this fear of nuclear attack, and I think the worry was that they might well use Aldershot as a target area, certainly
Yes.
Portsmouth, and the measures that we should take to keep ourselves safe, if that was possible.
And did Michael Williams have any military background?
Yes, Michael, you know a bit about that.
Yeah, but he did national service in the army. I forget which regiment, but he was posted to Malaya on anti-terrorist work, and I think he was shocked how little or how ill prepared they were for what they were going to be confronted with. And that really was one of the things that prodded him into action in this instance. He thought that that was not a very satisfactory experience, and that if we were going to be faced with something really far worse, we ought to start thinking about it constructively. So he launched himself into this.
And the plan, as you say, goes to 70 pages.
Just
You
about
have,
68 or something.
Yes.
It's a 62-page document.
you have the original here.
Yeah, I think we
Sorry, this thing, yes.
Yes.
But it's got not only the plan for Thursley, but a whole lot of diagrams of Sawyer stoves and, I don't know, all sorts of things.
Well, and
which,
this bunkering that he was encouraging
yes,
internal
Yes,
as opposed to
yes.
external bunkering.
Yes.
camp equipment and so on.
And lots of cartoons.
Yes.
There were
First
a lot
World
of
War, yes.
Yeah, and for some extraordinary reason, they were all First World War. Oh dear, who was the cartoonist?
Bruce
Bairn's
Bairn's
father,
that's right.
who was extremely good.
That's one of them.
But it did seem rather odd to hark back to the First World War when you were talking about nuclear warfare.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
that was a rather humorous side to this operation.
And he was very clever because he gave almost everyone in the village had a role. It
Oh
was-
yes, the list of
they all had jobs.
jobs to be undertaken was really quite something.
Yeah.
And he was also very clever because he divided the parish into 4 areas.
Yes.
That's right.
So there was Bullhead Green
Pitch
and
Place.
Pitch Place, Thursley,
Thursley.
and Warren Park.
So there was, yes.
Right.
And then he also did a sort of another division, which was the Inn division, which was matters relating to inside the parish.
Yes.
And then the outside world. So you were either in
In
the
or
in
out.
team or the out team. And the head of the head of the inn section was Rear Admiral John Holt, who lived
Pitch
Pitch
Place.
Place.
Pitch Place,
Yes.
where the Clakes now live, I believe.
No, he
No.
was in, I think it's called Heather Cottage. I
Oh,
can't
okay.
remember, but it's next door to the Clakes.
Ah, okay.
Tommy Craddock Henry, who was a doctor, lived at the
where the
Clakes.
Clakes,
That's right.
yes.
Field
And
prayers.
for the outside world, the out section was Major Brian Camp, who was at the Hollies.
Right. Yes.
And was then chairman of the parish council. So it's a bit strange that he was an out. You'd have thought
Yes,
he
he
was
was a
an
sort
in.
of overall
Yes.
everything,
Yes.
I suppose. Yeah.
And then he divided all up into teams. And I think you've got the list of the teams there.
I think Tim has. I don't
Yes,
think we
so
have
there
for
was
some
agriculture, which was Tom Ransom, the dairy farmer at Bullhead Green.
Yes.
Community permits, that was you, Tim, and we'll
Yes.
talk about that in a minute.
Right.
Community records, Bill Cooper, who was the parish clerk. Cosford Valley, H. Smith, we still can't remember his...
He's called Howard Smith.
Ah, well
And
done.
they lived in Bedford and Hoe Farm. And I remembered afterwards.
Yes. Finance and barter was Rich Timberlake, who you said was a stockbroker.
No, he was a stockbroker. He was really a fund manager. He brought Schlesinger. He was with Schlesinger Investment Management, and then he set up Fidelity in the UK. Fidelity was an American investment house, but he was briefly a stockbroker before he took on that.
Food, Michael O'Brien, and we'll come on to that. And there was... hospital was Tim Craddock Henry, who was...
Tommy.
Yes, Tommy.
Yes, Tommy.
Oh, Tommy.
Tommy,
Sorry.
yes, Tommy.
No.
And monitoring radio was Richard DuPont, who lived at the Hatch. News and information, Robert Tan, Pitch Place. Public health, Frank Davis, who lived
In Red Lodge.
right. And refugees and defence was Sam Aldridge.
Who lived just beyond Red Lodge in that house that looks out over the... down onto Ginny Duke's. The house
Right.
behind. Well, there's Valerie Ferris, but almost there,
Yes,
sort of.
yes.
Just above.
And he'd had a military.
He had indeed been in the army and would tell you about it at great
Yes,
length.
he spoke unceasingly. He'd
Our
never
children
heard the
loved it
ceasefire.
actually, they thought it was terribly fascinating, so we the parents used to run away.
And then veterinary and dentist was Douglas Smith, who
Yes.
also lived at Pitch Place.
Yes.
It's funny that the two were... the vicar at the time was Canon John Stevens, and water was Alistair Banks, who lived at Springs.
Springs,
Which,
Yeah.
Got a well or two.
Very
Yes.
appropriate.
Waverley liaison was John Porter, who lived at
Garth
Garth
Cottage.
Cottage,
yes, and works depot was Tim Holford. Though
Who was at
in the
Ford.
document, these are all the team leaders, but in the document, the works depot have many team leaders.
Yes.
But Tim seems to have 2 asterisks, so he's the leader of
The
leaders.
leader of leaders.
The leader among leaders.
Yes. And you said that Michael Williams was obsessed with refugees, the problem of refugees.
Well, yes, I think he was terribly nervous that we would be so well prepared, thanks to his enormous document, that people might want to take advantage of how well organised we had become. But there were these terrifying points which I hadn't realised, that he was at pains to say that it really wasn't much good having an air raid shelter in your back garden from a legacy of the last war. You really had to bring reinforcement into the house, earthworks and everything else. And if you vacated your property, apparently, under a national emergency, a vagrant could occupy it and seize it from you.
And you would lose
You could
it forever.
lose your ownership of the property, apparently, in a time of national emergency. So I think people were horrified by that, but I didn't see much earth being shifted into their houses.
The very idea.
What he actually wrote in the document was Thursley householders and billeted refugees will dig their shelters in their houses, cart in sufficient earth to surround themselves in every direction with earth, to as near to high as they can shovel, add breathing tube, food and water, some sort of support in case the roof caves in, and an anti-drip sheet, rain sheet, and hope.
Hope would be the biggest component.
Yes.
Well, we have a very good cellar here, I mean, which could easily be converted
But
into
imagine
a
shifting
bomb-proof.
earth into it.
Oh, I know, it would have been an
I mean,
appalling.
totally
yeah,
ridiculous.
Yeah, it was
And anyway, the
ludicrous
air
idea.
that would have come through the breathing tube was presumably polluted. So I'm not sure it would have done any of us any good.
And the other slightly interesting point was, post the explosion, anyone visiting your property
Oh,
had
yes.
to be stripped naked and hosed before they crossed the threshold.
Brilliant. and he had a rather wild suggestion to the vicar, didn't he, Michael?
About putting a machine gun.
Defence. And
Oh yes, I mean, that was an incredible suggestion. He was obsessed with the idea of ravening hordes coming down from London, and he felt that a machine gun should be installed in the vicarage garden, which could be trained on the road coming in from the A3. And the vicar was appalled. So it was never implemented, obviously.
It was going to be between, and a barrier, or the machine gun, perhaps both, between the barn at Wheeler's Farm and the vicarage garden.
Yes.
I mean, that's where a definite bottleneck was
That's
going to
right,
be.
yes.
Yes,
yes.
he decided that Bevan's garage at
Yes, would do
Wheeler's
it.
Farm would
Wheeler's
be,
Farm.
yes.
Yes.
That's right, Wheeler's.
And also another roadblock at the top of Highfield Lane at Highfield Farm.
Oh,
But
really?
he didn't say which Highfield Farm.
Right.
And,
No, all right.
and then roadblocks on the
on the
main road as well. So
But John Stevens Baker said it was the most unchristian thing he'd ever heard of.
He was
It certainly wasn't having
He
it in
was
his
absolutely
garden.
appalled.
so let's move on to food, Michael, which was your speciality.
Well, I'd had, as you know in the text, I'd had the misfortune to spend a brief period as the partner in charge of the firm's, or partner's, lunchroom. Michael latched onto this straight away and thought this was an ideal background for field catering in warfare. I mean, nobody could have known less about how to cook than I did. And
not in those circumstances.
so it was a very, very silly appointment, but I didn't have the nerve to refuse to act.
And we do have a recipe somewhere for mince for 100.
Yes, I haven't seen that for some
No,
time.
neither have I. How long planning on doing it? But you also were told, I think this was maybe Lady Ball, that you could use cattle that were standing.
Yes,
That's
that's
right,
it.
yes,
Yes,
I suppose they're
exactly, yeah.
alive if they're standing.
Well, that's
Yes,
the
yes,
idea.
sorry.
But
You don't eat
probably
full
a
stock.
horrible
No,
death.
no, full on stock
Dead
was not
stock,
acceptable.
not-
That would have to be standing, wagging their tails.
And the rations were going to be stew we were all to survive on a pint of stew a day for 12 months.
Imagine.
Can you?
Yes.
It's just a mind-boggling thought, isn't it?
And he also suggested that bathtubs were to be used as cauldrons.
Oh, we'd be boiling
bath
up the
tubs.
stew in the
Yes.
bath.
You were going
yes.
to boil. Yes. Yes. And so going back to the city lunchroom,
Yes.
what sort of fare did you put on for your fellow partners?
Well, we had a very good cook.
Oh, it was city renowned.
And,
Flags
and
were seen.
the cook devised the menus, which were then submitted to me for approval.
Not
And,
difficult to approve.
and in spite of my profound ignorance in these matters, I used to say, oh, it looked very good.
Best steak.
And she was a jolly good cook. Yes. So
We couldn't have possibly reproduced anything of the sort.
Do I?
I have to
We
say,
could not have possibly reproduced
No,
anything.
not at home.
Not even for a sort
No.
of dinner party,
Having
let
lunch
alone
in the
in the
wet.
middle of a
Yeah.
nuclear disaster.
And again, the document, and I quote, says, the whole of our leadership effort stands or falls on feeding and watering our community. So there was a lot riding on you.
Yes,
No pressure, Major, no pressure.
I hope not too many people knew who it was who was responsible. They might have gone in the opposite direction.
Yes,
after
they
that.
might have exposed it. Oh dear.
And Tim, you were in charge of community permits and signals.
Yes, I think allowing people in and out of the village by permit, and I think also having a sort of a code on bell ringing to signify when the all clear was sounded or when there was an attack from the marauding hordes from Guildford or
Ringing
wherever.
the sort of tocsin bell.
But whether the bells would have still been standing after a nuclear blast is rather doubtful, I think.
So it was going to be, the code was going to be, one code was for attack, 2 was for radioactive warning, 3 for the all clear, and then there was 4 was the refugee trouble. We're back to refugees
Right,
again.
that's right, with the invasion.
But
Was that
how,
4 strikes of the bell, was it?
Yes, how
Okay.
did you ever get round to sort of practicing?
Well, no, other than ringing the bells on a Sunday. I mean, I knew how to ring the bell, but as I say, whether they'd still be suspended correctly in the belfry, I rather wonder. But no, I mean, it would have been an easy way of communicating some sort of message.
but
which
only
would carry.
only in a very small, because we can't hear the bells.
Can you not from
No.
the top of the lane? Right.
No.
You
So
had to send somebody up on a bike to shout at.
Yeah, that's
Attacks.
interesting.
Is that why you're never in church?
always late. But the church was going to be the hub of the community centre,
Yes,
wasn't
it was. There was an idea that
That's
the
where the
August-
feeding was to take place. We were all going to sit in the pews and munch our food.
So there's the, I don't know if you can see it, so the old parsonage was going to be the hospital and doctor's surgery. The church was notice board assembly, eat, entertain church. Hill Farm was the cookhouse with a hot shower. There were going to be latrines and waste disposal, and Hill Farm Cottages was HQ, and then Hill Farm Barns was going to be the works depot. So he got it all planned out. So this was the whole. This was going to be the sort of
plan,
absolute
hub of it
centre.
all.
Yes.
Absolutely. He was also concerned, and this is why we got to. Oh, I'm sorry, I've lost myself. Howard Smith. Costford Valley had its own team leader.
Right.
I suppose because
It is away from here.
Yes.
It would have been easier for them to be in one place.
Who was the leader for?
Howard Smith,
Howard Smith.
Bedford and
Bedford
Hill
Farm.
Farm.
Oh yes,
Eileen
right.
Smith, do you remember?
Yes, I do. Yes.
That's right.
So in conclusion, Michael Williams must have put hours and hours of work into this project because
Nice.
it is just an amazing thing. And today it's very easy to ridicule it, and some of the suggestions were farcical, but it's the urgency that Michael Williams wanted to put into action certain ideas. He really did want to sort of, he
Try.
did see the threat.
Mm.
Yes.
It surprised us all. I think we were really not expecting anything as
Magnitude. No.
as this.
But he wanted to get households to keep fast meat producing rabbits.
Oh,
That was that him. He was very keen that people should start
have-
keeping rabbits. He was very keen about shotguns, wasn't he?
Yes.
He reckoned that again to keep the refugees away, and so he was very keen that people should acquire shotguns and cartridges.
Well, you'd have
Right.
been
You'd
right.
have been all right. We'd all come to your house.
That was pre you becoming a guns expert at Christmas. You just stood up wed at the time. You had your
Had
own
it.
armoury.
Yeah.
And he was very keen in the autumn winter of 1981 that the farmers should go out with their tractors and dig large pits. One to produce the earth for the
This great
yes,
fortification
to bring
in your
it into
house.
your house, and also to have pits to dispose of
Dead.
bodies, dead
Rubbish.
animals,
Yeah.
rubbish, and all the rest of it. So
I mean, you have got to think of all these things, and he really did
yes,
give a lot of consideration.
and he must have been quite an enjoyable project, even though it was quite a grim subject.
Grim thought, yes.
Yes, I think he relished it. I think he was the sort of chap who enjoyed this sort of challenge.
Well, and going back to his background with the National Service and not being prepared,
Yes.
that here was his chance to actually put some plans
Yes,
and make some.
Yes.
do the job properly, as he thought.
Yeah, it's true.
And it was understandable.
Although we
But,
kind of laughed even at the time.
yes, well,
I mean, I think I just thought, hope this all blows over. Yes, which it fortunately
I
did.
think there was an intake of breath, but probably in a nuclear explosion there shouldn't be that either. When we saw the document, God.
Yeah.
Well, I seem to remember you, Tim, saying that you'd rather take a deep swallow of nuclear air than face Michael's cooking.
Oh, good Lord.
Well, certainly when I was talking to Sue Langdale earlier, she reminded me that when they were at Heath Hall, they had a chap's name I can't remember in part of the house, and he was known to enjoy a drink, and he said to Anthony, why don't you, in the event of this ghastly catastrophe happening, you've got a wonderful cellar in Heath Hall,
Let's open it
with
up.
plenty of wine, and we'll just drink ourselves into oblivion. That'd be a much better way of going.
I think that would have been
Ever practical.
ever preferable too.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sally.
No, thank you, Sally, indeed.